Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome everybody to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission for today. We're going to be starting with today's meeting, moving to item 1. If we could perhaps confirm the minutes of the meeting which we held at our last Scrutiny Committee on the 19th December. Is everybody agreed with the minutes? And we can pick up any actions the Commission's agreed or suggested in the works programme later on in the agenda. Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutes. Can we receive any apologies for absence, please, and to note any substitute members in attendance? Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Eagle, Councillor Land, Councillor Turner. We have Councillor Bambridge substitute for Councillor Turner and Councillor Taylor as substitute for Councillor Land. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any chairman's announcements, and I haven't had any notification of any urgent business. If there are any declarations of interest of a disclosable pecuniary nature, then members, as stated, will be required to withdraw at that particular point. Do members have any declarations of interest to declare at this point? No, thank you. We also note the non-members of the Commission who are here. Welcome, Councillor Blackburn. Thank you very much. You may wish to address the meeting today. We've got quite a detailed and complex area to look at today, both with the executive brief, and particularly economic growth from Councillor Clausen, and the draft budget later on. So if I can now ask Councillor Paul Clausen, the Cabinet Member, to invite and present his report, and perhaps I could also say, given our packed agenda, members will already have had the slides and the presentations. Look some very good, colourful slides. But if we're able to keep to some of the main points, allowing for questions, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm very pleased to be here today and share the update on the work of my portfolio. I'm joined by some of the core office team who are supporting this, and I'll be inviting them to share their perspectives themselves as part of this update, as I feel passionately that this is a team effort. I have some questions I've included in this to prompt some feedback from the Commission, but obviously welcome any debate on the topics raised. As I'll come on to one of the brilliant but sometimes daunting things about the portfolio is the potential breadth of areas it can touch. So I will look forward to a very lively debate. I thought I'd start with a little of the vision and the mission of the portfolio from my perspective. We've echoed the wording of the corporate plan on screen for members, but if I could decounsel this for colleagues, I see our job as quite simply about doing a few things well. 1, pushing a long-term and ambitious vision where we want our district to be, not for our generation, not even for our children's, but for their children and beyond. Because I'm very sure that if we don't do that, nobody else will, and we'll be stuck in the same rut, making short-term decisions. 2, bringing people together, whether that be businesses, funders, or other parts of the public sector. We lead sometimes from the front and sometimes from the back. 3, making a difference in those key areas where we can, which means trying to be focused and targeted when it comes to the limited resources we can muster. An absolutely key element of this is our work in partnership, because we are uniquely placed as a district to bring people together, to advocate for change on the ground, and to hold partners to account to make more positive outcomes. We will come on to future Breckland shortly, but it's effectively one of the biggest partnership mandates in the history of the district. Shared on the screen is a rough map of some of the core partnerships we either lead or involve ourselves in through this portfolio, and they are diverse. One of my key mantras in this space is around focusing efforts on where this is and where we can build trusting and productive relationships. The other key element about how we work is being dynamic when it comes to resourcing. Long gone are the days where economic development is something driven through core funding of local councils. Instead, part of our mission will always be to be creative in the way we can secure investment, not just direct into our own programs, but into partners' activity and local businesses. I'm very proud that over the last few years, we've moved to having a strong pipeline of activity that we fundraise against, working on the basis we should have a set of viable and shovel-ready schemes and not have to scrabble around looking for opportunities at the last minute when funding becomes available. We've also been very proactive in building relationships with partners and improving our own capabilities for bid writing, the results of which I believe have been powerful, and we should continue to reap the benefits of this moving forward. At this point, I'd like to invite some of the team to share with the Commission a few highlights from across the portfolio programme to help bring the work to life that we're doing a little better. I promise, Chairman, we'll keep this brief, but I really think it's important to hear the words of those delivering on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Towson. So I won't spend lots of time describing to you where Snetterton employment zone is. You'll probably be familiar with that, or indeed its connectivity, which is terrific. But some of the salient points really is just to describe some of the activity that we've been delivering there over the past couple of years, which has been very meaningful and very impactful, I would suggest. So it has been a combination of enabling activity and some direct delivery. The direct delivery, of course, was perhaps beyond what some might consider core business for a local authority, in that we delivered a new primary substation at the location. Why? That was to enable growth that was otherwise prevented from coming forward. And what we've ended up with is a collaborative and sort of far-reaching vision of economic growth at Snetterton, which can be delivered in collaboration and partnership. And so we've targeted a lot of our efforts at enabling the partnership working to deliver across the whole, and sort of as a result of that, deliver maximum benefit. So that's really where we focused our effort. That I would like to say that that's achieved success. We've got immediately power capacity available from the PSS now, which is great news, and we're starting to see buildings come forward on the back of that. We've got about 100 acres now of land that has permission and has buildings going up on it and buildings upon it already. So it's really quite exciting in that context. And we've got more permissions now extant at Snetterton than ever before. And we're seeing quite significant scale private sector investment on the back of the public sector enabling that. So you can see some of the figures there on the screen before you. I would contend that they're really quite impressive, but you know, proof is in the pudding, so to speak, and we can see the buildings going up there. So yeah, that's really where we've got involved, and it's been quite impactful, I would suggest.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Paul. Just to kind of keep you going through this whistle-stop tour of some of the key highlights from the portfolio. One of the kind of overarching things, and the Snetterton Growth Programme Steve just described forms a part of this, it is our future Breckland programme of work. This could probably be a kind of overview and scrutiny session in itself, so I will kind of just keep to the core highlights from my perspective. But since its adoption back in 2023, this really has been the kind of one of the key guiding lights in how we approach the challenges and the opportunities for the portfolio. I think that the key things perhaps for members to keep in mind are this provided each town and the district as a whole with something of a kind of 10-year roadmap about the priorities and the things that each place wanted to see happen. Positively, we've been able to make some really strong progress in that. We'll come back to some of the highlights as we kind of talk through this, but I'm thinking particularly the activity we've been able to do in Swaffham with the Historic Market Town programme, activities around Durham Marketplace and Watton Middle Street, leisure centre in Attleborough, the work that the long-term plan for towns in Thetford is going to enable. It is providing a really helpful guide, not just to us, but to our partners about what it is we should be doing. And as part of that, as Paul alluded to in his introduction, one of the engines has been the kind of joint work we've been able to do with partners, including some co-funded posts and co-funded activities. Some of the numbers are up there on screen in terms of some of the number of activities and amount of funding we've been able to raise on the back of this. And we'll come back at the end of the presentation about the kind of next steps for this, because we are a few years into the programme. One of the things we said from the outset, we want to keep it live, we want to keep it relevant, and we're wanting to make sure that we've got all the kind of inputs for that to help us shape what priorities should be in the next few years.
Morning. Good morning, members. The Swaffham Historic Market Town, we saw some fantastic outcomes on the back of the HAS programme, which completed in 2020. We saw some building grants, repairing the assembly rooms, new shop fronts, public realm improvements, new wayfinding signage for visitors. And that concluded in March 24, and that left a legacy of restored landmarks, and it strengthened community ties. And that really paved the way for the new Swaffham Historic Market Town project, which started last April. The new programme, it unites public bodies, businesses, community organisations, again to deliver heritage-led regeneration, unlocking Swaffham's both economic and cultural potential. It's an example of excellent partnership working from a whole host of partners alongside ourselves with Historic England, National Lottery Heritage Fund, Swaffham Town Council, Norfolk and Norwich Festivals, and the local cultural consortium. The project supports business investment, youth engagement, and enables people to connect with their town and the heritage. We're now 9 months into the new 3-year project with partnership from a range of funders, and that is building on successes from previous years and the momentum we sustained before. In the last 9 months, we've made really good progress. The initiative aims to restore and revitalise 9 to 12 historic buildings within the conservation area, breathing new life into the heart of the town. The Building Improvement Grant Scheme has already seen works to the Methodist Church. You can see the works on the screen there. And another grant has just come in through for a new shopfront for My Hills. In the last week, we've seen work started on Plowright Place, which is supporting 21 different businesses, and grants have also been offered to the Market Cross Cafe, Swaffham Cafe, and the Town Council for some surveying works to the Buttercross. Community engagement and training initiatives have given college students the chance to try heritage skills and local people building skills in building maintenance and photography of the buildings. And the local cultural consortium ran a successful harvest fair, bringing the community together to celebrate Swaffham's history and heritage. And then over the next few months, we're seeing work on 3 major repair and shopfront projects. And last week, we actually saw students from the local Nicholas Hammond School starting to recreate the market town in what you'll know as probably Minecraft, so a real new innovative way to do that there. We've also got a retrofit workshop in March, so we're inviting our partners and various people to come and talk to and listen to how we make our historic homes more energy efficient. And then we've also got some teaching our local college students of the historic craft of lime mortaring. And that just sums up with a further heritage fair in the summer. In terms of helping our high streets have changed and they continue to do so. And the difficulties faced due to economic pressures, changing consumer habits and competition from online shopping, our focus is really about bringing more activity and creativity to high streets. Helping drive footfall and attract new visitors continues to be really, really important. Our Meanwhile scheme gives financial support to new or expanding Breckland businesses, and since starting in 2022, we've invested over 180,000 into the scheme and engaged over 100 business owners, allowing 21 entrepreneurs to open their first business, 4 to create their business, and creating over 20 jobs, filling over 1,000 metre squares of empty commercial space. We've again partnered with NCC with enabling our Love Your Market Town, and that has seen communities and businesses successfully securing grants to bring life and footfall into our high streets from new market stalls, a treasure trail and family activities. We hope initiatives such as these will also work hand in hand with some very new legislation which has just come into force around high street rental auctions, which does give local authorities new powers to hold rental auctions to let qualifying high street premises which have been unoccupied for at least a year in order to breathe new life back into high streets and transform empty shops.
Thanks, Claire. So in terms of supporting our rural businesses, we recognise that the world of farming is changing rapidly. We recognise there's an ever increasingly complex regulatory regime being imposed upon the farming community and the challenges recruiting the staff necessary to fulfil the roles. In response to this, last year we recruited a rural business advisor. His name is Phil, he sat behind me, and he truly understands the issues faced by rural businesses, being a farmer himself. And through that programme of activity, we've engaged with about 35 businesses already, and we want to do more. And that's exploring ways in which we can support them, as I say, in these ever increasingly complex times. Those visits have yielded some quite interesting ways in which we can help guide them through the conversations, shall we say, that they're encountering with regulatory colleagues, and whether that's an environment agency or DEFRA or Natural England, for example. We've been working closely with those partners to sort of smooth the process. Engagement with the NFU is critical, of course, and that's growing by the day, and we were exploring further ways in which we can add value through that partnership working. A really brilliant example of that is the sort of newly introduced odour emissions criteria which were introduced, and the limitations that now are imposed upon farmers, and ways in which they've got to be delivered. And Phil's been working closely with farmers to make sure they fully understand the implications of that and ways to meet them and what that means for them. We're working closely with the NFU, as I've already mentioned, the CLA as well, and that's proved really effective so far. One of the things that we're also doing as well in that territory is, of course, we've developed a rural business grant scheme utilising our REP allocation for that, as you can see on the screen. What we found is, because of the way we set that up and tailored it appropriately, we've actually found that's been really successful in terms of the number of businesses that's been able to support, and you can see the sort of private sector finance that's leveraged on the screen and the numbers there, which again I would contend are really quite impressive. So we're pretty proud of that, really.
In terms of UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we started receiving that in 22-23 with 1.6 million total funding distributed over a 3-year period. And our approach followed the Cabinet approval, which approved an investment plan which spread out activity over 5 broad themes. And it included an emphasis on delivering against a defined priority and leveraging wider investment. And some of those outcomes that we've seen from there have included the expansion and continuation of inspiring communities, links to the thriving places, and we've seen things like the continuation of food hubs, the newly opened early help hub, the link, along with the mobile food stores and pop-up pantries. We've also designed and delivered a business-led scheme to practically solve and enable decarbonisation schemes, so aimed at local businesses and community estate level, and that has leveraged an additional 100,000 support with programmes specific to Snetterton and Thetford, and produced some decarbonisation plans for businesses. The Breckland Skills Programme, which is ongoing at the moment, has produced bespoke skills programmes for the Brecklands economy, and that has included things like the Boost Programme, the National Manufacturing Programme, and the Youth Enterprise Scheme, which is just about to start in schools. But there's been localised business support activity with conjunction with our partners, and that's included things like the Breckland Go Digital Programme, and that's supported 50 local SMEs, and also the expansion of the Meanwhile scheme and the continuation of the Growth Hub supporting 80 businesses. And finally, the delivery and the progression of a mix of small and big schemes under the Future Breckland programme, including funding towards the Swaffham Historic Market Town programme, feasibility support for the Thetford Gateway, the MEP, and Breckland Breckland Investment Fund, along with the smaller schemes like Loch Neaton in Watton, and work on cycling and walking paths.
Final quick bit from us, Chair. Just to kind of wrap up with the kind of programme highlights. Claire's kind of briefly touched on this, but one of the things we wanted to call out, because I think it kind of talks a bit to Paul's challenge to us to be both long-term and creative and push into spaces that aren't necessarily natural fits for districts where they make the most, but because they make a difference, has been our working skills. So, and again, with thanks to a number of many members here for helping shape this. Last year, the council adopted its first skills plan, which kind of set out a programme of activity for the next 5 years with a 25-year target in terms of outcomes. We've been really positive about the progress we've been able to make with that over the last 6 to 9 months. Boost is kind of one of the highlight schemes that's been where the most resource has been able to be focused. That's been delivered in conjunction with colleagues in Norfolk County Council, and is particularly focused on supporting some of our most vulnerable residents, those young people who are not in education, employment and training. And by the end of the year, end of financial year, we'll have supported 150 young people. And I've been lucky enough to see some of that on the ground, and it is really kind of quite moving and inspiring what some of the things those guys have been able to do. Our partnerships with schools and with employers has grown. We've been able to set up our own skills and employment assembly to keep bringing people better together. And coming into next year, there's a number of kind of more physical centres that we want to see established and set up, particularly in our market towns, to help address some of those mobility challenges of getting people who live in the district able to access quality skills provision. That's all we wanted to cover off.
Thank you, Claire, Steve and Andrew. I hope you will agree there's a lot of exciting and innovative work taking place. And I'd like to draw my submission to a close with just a few points of observation and reflection on the future. To tackle the biggest obvious issue on the horizon, devolution in particular, but local government reorganisation, of course, clearly represent one of the biggest changes on the landscape in decades. We are on a pathway which could see a mayor for Norfolk and Suffolk that will command much of the future investment available for growth. And whilst on that pathway, we're going to have to work through a period of intense uncertainty and change. A grim reality of these times is a contraction in funding available. We've seen many funders effectively close up shop, and with bigger spending reviews pending in Whitehall, a massive contraction in the resource available for us to fight for. As with many departments, we're also needing to cut our cloth accordingly, and that's likely to mean a smaller offer from 25-26 onwards, through the budget which is being considered by Council next month. Despite this, there are significant things to look forward to, and innovations I expect to be able to deliver. This should be the year where we're able to plan in earnest for how we turn 20 million into 200 million for the work we're about to commence in Thetford. A decision is due on how to direct the money in March, but through you, Chairman, I'd be very interested on anything that the Commission has to say on this, either in now or offline later. We're also very keen to make sure that the plans we work to are as relevant as possible, and particularly looking to a future where we might have a mayor for Norfolk and Suffolk deciding where to spend money. And to that end, that we need a range of shovel-ready schemes to deliver for the people of Breckland. To that end, we've been reviewing all of our future Breckland plans and working with town partners and the public for their views on what might change or improve again. I'd happily take the insight from the Commission about what they feel we should do with our town delivery plan refresh moving forward. I hope from March we'll be able to bring the outcome of all this to Cabinet in the form of a new economic strategy for the district. I appreciate we've covered a lot of ground, but that's us drawing to a conclusion, Chairman, and hopefully in a timely fashion for you. Thank you.
Thank you. and your team for that concise run through those areas. I said, I think we had more or less around about 6 areas that you covered. You know, the rural, the Snetterton project, the high streets, Snetterton, the Swaffham historic market town, the future programme, skills agenda, challenges and opportunities, and your conclusion, some of the challenges and opportunities ahead. And we're hearing a lot about growth nationally as well, yesterday, going forward, and today locally. I think that I'm just going to hand over now to members of the Commission to see if they've got any particular questions. And I think obviously, I'm sure members and other councillors will have await with interest further details coming to the Cabinet, and then also future council, because these are ongoing issues, lots of detail in terms of implementation outcomes, you know, evidence where we've got growth in better areas of the district than others, what we were seeking, how we seem to overcome things. So it's a big area, but thank you for that. So I'm now going to hand over to any members of the Commission. I'll take members of the Commission first in order, putting up. So if I can have a show of hands at the moment. So we'll have, first of all, Councillor Kybird, Councillor Bambridge, Councillor Taylor. So we'll start off with those 3 colleagues in order. So perhaps the first question from Councillor Kybird. Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. As regards the Shared Prosperity Fund, first question is, what is the spending window for that? And then what is the likely format of start-up support? And presuming to the extent that Snetterton is growing, is that electrical upgrade fully committed to new projects, or is there still room for further growth? I guess ultimately that might affect our business rates income, and we are under threat of a business rates reset, which sort of takes us back to square one without new growth. Thank you.
They're very specific, so it's best coming from you guys.
Okay, I'll do UKSBF, that's right, and Steve, you're right doing Snetterton. Yep. So to answer, thanks, Councillor Kybird. So for Shared Prosperity, I think the programme that we are available to commit resources to for this coming financial year. So I think your question was just about what that could look like. So effectively, the money that the government has just confirmed available to the district is around £430,000 of revenue funding and £100,000 of capital funding. There's a kind of map on this in the slides we shared, but we can share more details if members would find it helpful. Effectively, the government have set out a broad menu of the kind of interventions that they see could be accomplished under the categories communities in place, supporting local business, people and skills, and it is down to local determination about how we would like to see them applied. And it is quite a broad spread from kind of funding economic development activity to funding homeless support. It is intended, I guess, to support what we perceive locally to be key priorities. The key constraints, I suppose, really are this money has to be committed and spent within this coming financial year. We do not anticipate there to be further rounds and understand they'll likely be picked up by regional entities, whatever they look like in the future. And we are on a path to kind of confirm the council's position by the end of March. And to kind of, this is pretty much half the press for us, so any early insight from ONS, very helpful. Is that helpful for Shared Prosperity? And do you want to do that?
Yep, thanks. So as part of the Snetterton PSS project, we've initially delivered 6 MVA of capacity. We've got a plan for how that will be utilised in order to deliver business growth at the location. And we're sort of in the process of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, really, in respect of that initial 6 MVA of capacity. Beyond that, the facility actually enables a further 30 to 40 MVA of capacity, which is an enormous amount of power, and will have the propensity to power quite a lot of growth at the location, depending on end users, of course. But we anticipate that will actually meet the needs of a large chunk of the allocated land as it exists currently and beyond.
Thank you. Gordon.
Chairman, if I just might on that, just to give an overview. that's what was talked about briefly in the presentation, because it's an area which Breckland shouldn't have even started to get involved in. You know, we've nothing to do with electricity per se, but without stepping in, doing something, there would have been no further expansion in Snetterton. So Steve had to become an expert in relatively short time. And this authority had to lead from the front, as we said, sometimes from the back, sometimes from the front. And that's a clear example of where we had to lead from the front in an area which is not our responsibility. And now I've got Snetterton into a position where we believe it is just going to go from strength to strength. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I ask my question, I would just like to say I'm a rural member, so I would quite like to have a chat with Phil at some stage if we could connect up. I've got two questions, but I'm happy to ask one and then come back after other people have had the second. And my question is quite simple. I'm a rural member, but I have a lot of complaints about the state of high streets, the empty premises, and of course the overabundance of some types of business in our high streets. Can you explain to me exactly what and how a rental auction works? What happens, how it deals with private property and so on?
Thanks for your question. High street rental auctions, the guidance is very new. The legislation just came in just before Christmas, so we're just taking some time to digest and see how that might work for us. But in essence, it requires to do some consultation firstly on what are those defined areas of where the high street is applying, and that can be high streets in town, but it can also extend out of town as well, as long as there's a real community benefit of that high street. It's where a property has been empty for at least a year, and what it does, it enables the local authority to have some power to get the landlord to put the property onto market. So there are long legal processes in getting to that point of serving notice if we need to, but of course the key part is that we work in partnership with the landlord. They are mostly proactive to try and get their property on the market, but it's making sure that we give advice and support to help them on that journey. Ultimately, if that process fails, then we can go to an auction. But it is a long process. We're working out how to do it, and it will come back to members with a policy over coming months.
If I can just come back, thank you very much. I hope you'll ensure the process isn't too long, but I appreciate you're still working that out. But will that enable small businesses, start-up businesses, and prospective businesses almost to get into our high streets in some way?
I'll share the love on this question. So potentially, yes. I mean, the reason we described it alongside our Meanwhile programme is because we see that the high street rental auction is a new legislative power enabled by the government. It's still very new, so there will be test law and it will be worked through. It's a kind of stick, potentially, that the district can use, and we're thinking about how best to use it to make sure that landlords are doing their bit. On the other end of the spectrum, part of our carrot solution is things like our Meanwhile programme, which is basically, if we can provide a little bit of help and assistance to get a new business onto the high street, maybe someone who's got this brilliant baking business that they're delivering from their kitchen, that's our kind of carrot incentive to make there be a different offer on the high street that works for kind of the way things are changing, but very much focused around small local things that are relevant. Our hope is that we can continue to do both of those things and more as a kind of joined up package of positive nudges, carrot stick around how we want the high street to evolve, and deliberately both for market towns, their high streets, but also some of the kind of smaller rural centres as well, where the same thing applies.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. Is it me or is there feedback? There's feedback, isn't there? Let's try that. Maybe it's this location. Oh no, that's a bit better. So I'm just having a look at the Shared Prosperity Fund graphics. If I understand this correctly, you're taking the government missions and you're mapping it out onto the policy areas. Yeah, is that my interpretation correct? Just because otherwise my questions.
That map is taken from the government guidance. That is the on our slide 17, the one with the kind of orange and purple and that is the government's map of how it applies it. If that makes sense, we haven't reinterpreted it.
So just an observation then. Given the way that I think that the emissions map out in relation to business and retail crime in particular, given comments from colleagues, I'd be really keen to see how that can evolve through this process into providing support within that space as well on the Safer Streets mission, not just within the kind of community-focused ones, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, but if you remember, I did ask for your input into this at this moment in time because you can genuinely influence our thinking. So if you want to do it offline, that would be great. So we are all ears at the moment, and there has been nothing decided at the moment. I can reassure you.
I think that was my feedback, yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question you perhaps can't answer, Paul, but has Breckland looking at building houses near this site? Because rather than people travelling from Norwich or Thetford, is there an area where we could look at housing? And the second question is, has anybody thought about putting a new train station? Because the line goes right through there, again, commuter way. You're talking about a long way in the future. I heard you say that the first thing you said. I'm looking the same way. So I just wondered if any thoughts through the council had thought about that as well. Thank you.
Are you specifically talking about Snetterton there? Yes. Right. Well, there is a line which goes into Snetterton, which is privately owned, and we're in continuous conversation with how that might be looked at in the future. So yes is the simple answer to that. And as far as the housing is concerned, the only thing I can really reassure you is that this portfolio and Sarah's portfolio really talk closely together because the two do go hand in glove, where you need homes, but homes need employment, and so they've got to. So that's a very much an ongoing dialogue that we have always.
Thank you. Any more contributions from members at all? Councillor Bambridge and then Councillor Kyberg, and then I'll ask any non-members. Thank you.
Well, my comment may be a bit redundant in light of what Councillor Plummer has said, because I was going to congratulate you on having vision and say, has your vision extended to reopening a railway stop at Snetterton, which with the proposed housing, if it happens with the call for sites in that area, could make a railway stop there quite an important plus for this area. And so I would like to see it, but well done for what you've done so far. This is excellent. Thank you very much for bringing it to us. And I wish you very well in your continuing work. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Paul Clausen mentioned the Thetford Town Board, which I presume will, to some extent, pick up on the work of the Thetford Growth and Development Partnership. Will have members in common, but presumably the new board will have considerably more resource than the current partnership. Now, the partnership is currently well represented by the neighbouring parishes. Will that continue on the town board, or is the town board's spending very much limited to the town of Thetford itself? Thank you.
I think it'd be better if you.
I can give you a quick answer, Councillor Kaibo, which is effectively all of that is kind of detailed still to be clarified. The government have positively reconfirmed their commitment to providing the funding, and we anticipate that will start not this coming financial year, but the financial year after. The one key bit of detail still pending is their kind of guidance and the kind of rule book that sits around this. As previously defined, some of those questions you asked are kind of a little uncertain and were being clarified with civil servants, but I think there is going to be, and the discussions have already sort of started in Thetford, an understanding that there needs to be the kind of right infrastructure around the right things and not duplicating too many people's times in Thetford. But that'll have to be cleared up, I think, once a bit more clarity is available from the government on their position with the funding.
And hopefully you picked up on what I said as well, that the team has been challenged to how they turn the 20 million into 200 million.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Robert. Any further questions from? We've got a question from non-member Councillor David Wickerson. Sorry, David Blackburn. My apologies.
Thank you, Harry. The Riverside development in Thetford has been talked about for quite a while now, a number of years. When will we actually see some outline or developed plans as to what's going to be happening? And will you be consulting the Thetford Town Council and what their thoughts are on that? And when will likely a spade go in the ground to start some work, please?
So I guess to just pick up a few bits of that. So absolutely, consultation will happen with the town, with partners on a scheme once there is kind of something tangible to work through. I mean, categorically, absolutely. It's got to, development in that space has to work for all Thetford. That's something that everyone's been kind of very clear with from the start. The kind of £20 million investment in Thetford is a really positive opportunity in that, and a potential way of making that real and not something that's kind of just like a nice idea. The slight delay in the funding coming on stream and the rules for it is part of the reason why we're perhaps holding back a little bit on some of that. But at the moment, there's work going on with partners who may have an interest in that and may be able to bring forward different kinds of schemes. Giving you timetables is a bit hard to confirm because there's quite a lot of different elements to that. But our aspiration from the district point of view, and it's not just the district's decision about that 20 million funding at all, would be that a scheme that people can understand and touch and feel and understand what it looks like should be kind of on the table for that town board to consider for its first years of priorities. So it is effectively something over the next 12 months that we'd like to see people seeing the detail of and getting into the conversation. But that is very reliant on partners and other activity.
Thank you. Any further questions, reflections from members at all? If not, I've just got one little sort of observation, as a question of my own to Paul and the team. We've mentioned some of the different themes and the challenges, and some of it are geographical specific, like Thetford, etc. You know, the 20 million investment there. When we come to cabinet or full council, will you be having something like a table which shows, right, this is what we're doing in those particular areas, when we're doing it, the amount of investment, so you can compare the different areas, and some areas where your levers or incentives, carrots or sticks are working or aren't working, so you can then do a comparison. As I also know that as with growth generally, people are often very keen to see results, you know, and I think Councillor Bamber's referred to things like, you know, towns, empty shops, etc. And in terms of the public and residents, they will appreciate all the longer and medium term stuff, but they want to say, well, what is going to happen now? Sometimes we've done our best with pop-up shops and rate relief and so forth, but people out there do want to see results. I appreciate they aren't quick, but it's helpful if we can tabulate those clearly so people know what is going to be happening and why. And there's in these uncertain times, we've got some degree of certainty. Thank you.
Yeah, and picking up on David's point there, for me, I really believe this is, if we take that to the next step, Chairman, that you have to have everybody working together. That's the reason Swaffham has been so successful, is the towns and the district and the county have all been absolutely seamless, and it's been one public estate really working. Now, you know and I know that isn't necessarily the case over the whole of Breckland. So what my strong message would be, if you really want to get that kind of working partnership together, start making it happen there as well as just looking at that. Because if you don't have that, you certainly, in my opinion, will not get the outcomes that you desire.
Oh, thank you very much for answering that, and I hope we can take that on board. And can I thank Paul and his team for the presentations today. I'm sure there'll be further questions for you at Cabinet and full Council. And as always, I'm sure you welcome any further questions from members of the Commission, either through our Commission officer or direct to you, so we can have further explanations. So thank you, and thank you, members. And we'll now move on to our next item. Thank you. Thank you, members and Commission. We now move on to another substantial item key to the whole of Breckland is our draft budget, medium-term plan and capital strategy for 25-26, and that's being led by Councillor Phil Cowan, Executive Member for Finance, Revenues and Benefits, with his team. And I now invite Councillor Cowan to present his report and take questions from Commission members. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I'm here to present to you for your consideration today the proposed draft budget, medium-term financial plan and capital strategy for the year 2025-2026. And together with that, we've indicated projections for the subsequent 3 years beyond that. You will recall, over the past few years, finances for local government as a whole have been challenging. This situation has been exacerbated by a range of factors outside of local control that for many authorities has resulted in a disproportionate impact on the ability to manage and maintain balanced budgets. I'm pleased to advise you that here in Breckland, we have been able to withstand much of this external pressure through judicious use of our resources, entrepreneurial measures and reserves, and all supported by our sound financial position, one that has no reliance on borrowing. Nevertheless, we are now facing what may be described as a perfect storm of events looming on the horizon, and these include things such as a lack of clarity regarding the national funding environment, a business rate reset, and in that context, you will have seen in the previous piece what's happening in Snetterton and the growth that we've enabled through that power installation. I look back at 2022, 2023, and our business rate take was around about £5 million back then. And you'll see from the papers you have before you today that it's up at just nudging 8 million. Now, that's no accident. It's entirely down to the fact that we're able to attract business into Breckland, and we can only do that if we're proactive, and that's a good example of how we've been able to do that. Nevertheless, the business rate reset will actually put a bit of pressure on us when it comes, and whilst we don't have an actual date, Alison, sitting here to my side, will probably be able to give you an indication of when her crystal ball will tell us when that might happen. There will also be a fair funding review looming. We've had significant funding cuts, and one of those, as you will have heard if you attended Cabinet, was our £624,000 reduction in our rural delivery grant. Now, for us as a rural district of 500 square miles, the centre of which is a bit like a polo mint called Stanta, you can't travel across it, you have to travel around it. It gives us significant challenges as a rural council. So that loss of £624,000 is significant. There have been demographic changes, we have reduced income, and we have demand pressures on our services, such as temporary accommodation, and I'm sure we're all familiar with the growth in numbers of people who find themselves homeless through no fault of their own, and whom we have an obligation to support. And we've been demonstrating how we can do that through our own housing provision in order to try and reduce those costs, but the temporary accommodation costs to this council are significant. Our revenues and benefits, similarly, are under pressure. And of course, we've got the waste services contract, which is going to change, as we know, as a result of central government instructions on things like food waste. However, despite all of the above, I'm pleased to present to you a balanced budget for the years 2025 to 2026, and moreover for the following year 2026 to 2027. And that protects all frontline services, reallocates funding to services with known demand pressures, maintains core services, and allows Breckland Council to invest in the corporate priorities, and more specifically perhaps those what I call discretionary services, of which we're not obliged to provide, but are so valuable and in many cases essential to many of our residents, businesses and communities in Breckland. Now, the papers before us today contain detail in the various appendices, but before highlighting much of that detail, perhaps it's appropriate to remind ourselves the purposes of preparing a budget, whether that be for our own domestic purposes, if we're a multinational corporation, or indeed, as we are here, a public sector local authority, where we, as a local authority, are required to demonstrate that we can deliver a balanced budget for the year ahead. Thus, we need to understand what income streams we receive, and balance that income against the cost of providing our services. And when and where appropriate, make provision for, or in sort of private sector parlance, accrue funds that may be required to meet commitments, where the substance may be known, but for which accurate costs are not yet ascertained. And examples may include, for example, replacing out-of-date machinery and equipment, upgrades to software and the like, and new licenses that are required to undertake some of the functions that we're now being asked to provide. That said, I believe that it's appropriate to draw out some salient points that underscore the funding challenges facing us and the measures we are taking to meet them. Appendix I, a new appendix you will note in the document, sets out the background and potential impacts of both the empty homes and second homes opportunities that government has granted local authorities. And you will note the comments regarding the different approach we are proposing for each. At Appendix J, developed in partnership with our funding advisors Pixel, we highlight various scenarios, outcomes and timings that we've used to support our proposed financial modelling as we look ahead. No crystal ball on my right for that. We actually have to take other advice from those who perhaps, hopefully, are able to give us that sound advice. Paragraph 1.9 on page 13 identifies the significant funding reductions, additional income, and our proposal for a council tax increase, together with the methodology to manage the national insurance increase announced in the recent budget. In paragraph 1.10, we identify the impact of the reduction in the Rural Services Delivery Grant, as I said, some £624,000, and particularly the timing of the announcement. Future funding complexities are explored in paragraphs 1.11 and 1.12, highlighting that the draft budget this year contains higher levels of estimates than would normally be the case. And in paragraph 113, the implications for the council of implementing the new waste requirements, including food waste collections, are identified. NNDR business rates and the implications of the impending reset are explored in paragraphs 1.14 to 1.17, and the proposals for the new homes bonus are set out in paragraph 1.18. Confirmation that the proposed annual increase in council tax of £4.95 for a Band D property per year meets the legislative requirements is shown in paragraph 1.19, and the efficiencies that Breckland has achieved and those that are proposed are scheduled out in paragraphs 1.20 to 1.22. Paragraphs 1.23 through to 1.32 deals with the potential offered regarding second homes and empty properties and the penalties that are specifically targeted at repeat offenders regarding the single person discount. Finally, the draft capital strategy and capital programme is explained in appendices G and H. There is of necessity a considerable amount of detail in this paper, and together with our Section 151 officer, Alison, on my right, we're happy to take questions. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much for that brief presentation, Phil, and touching on some of the appendices, which I'm sure everyone will have digested and read very thoroughly. Can I just ask members, any questions for Councillor Cowan on the draft budget and the year after going forward? Take Councillor Taylor first. If you'd like to go first, Sarah.
Try and avoid the feedback. Can't. Well, maybe the seat is problematic. Okay. Thanks for this. Can I just check something? On page 34, the central government funding sort of diagram showing roughly the funding changes from 2016-17 to 28-29. Is that, could you just clarify, is that the core, like the core sort of funding plus the elements in the bullet points at 1.9?
Yeah, thank you. So this is what the government call our settlement funding assessment. So it is like our core spending. So it includes rural services delivery grant when it existed, the services grant, the recovery grant, the funding guarantee, and a certain level of business rates, excluding the growth.
I've got quite a lot of questions, so I'll just do one more, and then otherwise it'll become some mad monologue. So the EPR is not included in that sort of chart. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Taylor. Any further questions, then we'll come back to Councillor Taylor. Councillor Plummer and then Councillor Kyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phil, could you go through that all again for me, please?
Any particular element of that? I hope so. Yes, I'll quite happily do it, but I'm not sure the chairman would appreciate it.
Councillor Kyburn.
That was the question. Right, that was the question.
That's
called a diversionary tactic, I believe. This is one of a two-part process that ends up with setting the council tax. The only thing we see as regards parishes in this is the properties tax base for each parish. And whilst on the Breckland charges schedule we see the current charge and the increase, it is not normal that in part two that we see the relative movement of the parish council's element of the council tax. So can I suggest as a recommendation that that be presented so that we can see the growth in the parish and town rates and see how that fits in with the Prime Minister's commitment to no increase in council tax? Thank you.
Chairman, I can answer that question quite easily. As you'll be aware, we're at a point in time where not every parish or town has actually submitted their precept requirements. However, I can say that the vast majority of those are in. I think we're all but 7, I think. So as soon as those figures are known, clearly we'll be able to put together a comprehensive, as we do when we come to debate the council tax setting in February. That information will form part of the proposals that come before full council. And I think it's absolutely right that we do so as well. You will have noticed, I think, that if we take the average parish precept for the current year, it's actually higher than the Breckland District Council tax for a Band D property. So I don't expect that to change when we come to the next year. Averages are by definition averages. Therefore, in order to get an average which is higher than the Breckland District Council tax, there are many towns or parishes that charge significantly more than Breckland's council tax. By same token, there are many smaller parishes that charge significantly less. But that is the fact, and you can see that on the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can now go back to Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Trying to save everyone from hearing my voice for another half an hour. I reckon we can just rattle through a bunch of these because I think some of them are just checking understanding largely. So the Rural Services Delivery Grant, did that result in any in-year deficit, or is that only from 25, from the next financial year?
Yeah, that's just from 25-26 onwards.
So I'm interested in the household food waste collection, and this, as much as anything, could just be my lack of understanding here, I suspect. So there's a couple of mentions around the household food waste collection. So if I'm reading everything correctly, from 2026, there's around 1.14 million capex associated with the grant received, if I'm reading the previous minutes correctly. Yeah, okay. And then we've got a line in the budget associated, which I believe is the spend of that grant plus a top up in effect for the vehicles needed, but then a ring fence into reserves of, I can't zoom in, an amount which is basically for future replacement. Could you just talk through, so I'm assuming that's future anticipated replacement of vehicles. So is there an assumption on the life of the vehicle, the design life, in effect, the operational life of the vehicles to be purchased?
I'll ask Alison to provide the detail behind that. Chairman, you did suggest, in fact, you wrote to me asking members to provide detailed questions for this particular presentation. I have received none. So it is disappointing that when we sit here in this room, I'm not able to bring with me particular officers who can actually provide that detail about waste collection. It's hot off the press, and we're going to do a little bit of, I imagine, flying by magic here on my right-hand side to give you, hopefully, an answer. But as I say, I can only use the word disappointing that I didn't get the requests prior to this. We've had plenty of time. Thank you. Alison, do you want to try and answer that?
Yeah, so on the food waste, we've had the capital funding, like you say, the allocation. So I think you're looking at the capital appendix there, the purchase of the vehicles. And you're correct, there's a top up from us on that. And then we estimate a life of between 8 and 10 years for the vehicles. Sometimes we can replace sooner if there's economic benefits, and sometimes it's worth keeping them for longer. So that will depend on the vehicle. we haven't yet been given the revenue funding for the rollout of the food waste. So this budget assumes that the revenue funding will cover the costs, which is a risk that may not, which is why we've said within the EPR funding we may use some of that for food waste.
Just to conclude that, it is disappointing again that when government provides new requirements for local authorities, we assume we get new burdens funding, and we do, but it's never 100%. There's always an assumption that we will be able to scrape the barrel and find a bit more. But in this particular case, this is such a significant change in the processes that we carry out. It does make it somewhat challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you got another question? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please carry on. Thank you, Sarah.
I know it's disappointing, Councillor Karen, but I was only given 20 minutes notice of being substitute, so wing of the pants in all orders, but I'm really happy to continue this away from this meeting if that's helpful, but I think it's useful to just cover some ground. Just wanted to understand in the 1.2, the table which talks about the new ways of working, there is a little sort of caveat or a little qualification under that table which talks about that they will be developed in effect. Have you got this is para 1.2. So on the new ways of working in the table, we're going from 490,000 in 25-26 up to 2 million over the course of 3 years of savings. You see where I am. Again, this may be a wing of the pants thing, but are the details on the savings or the assumptions in that step up in savings within this document, or do I need to look elsewhere for that information?
We're talking about the efficiencies here, aren't we? So Alison can give you that specific answer.
Yes, so the new ways of working are fully identified behind the scenes. So with all of these, they're identified apart from the bottom line, and that's what that caveat was talking about, because until we see the detail of the funding reforms and the rates reset, which will hopefully come in the summer, we don't exactly know what our gap will be in those future 2 years. So those are the areas that we haven't yet worked up. In terms of the new ways of working, the reason that ramps up quite significantly, the main reason for that is around our savings on nightly paid temporary accommodation, because we have a plan over the coming years to reduce the nightly paid costs for those that we house in temporary accommodation. So that's quite a big number within that.
Thank you very much for your questions, Councillor Taylor, and responses, Phil. Are there any further questions at this point from members? I see Councillor Wilkinson's raising his hand. Thank you.
If you'll indulge me, Chairman, I've not really got a question, just an observation that I've been sitting in this chamber for 10 years now, and year on year, we're paying Breckland residents, like we are paying the part of our annual council tax bill, the lowest part on there is the payment to Breckland. Even the average from town and parish councils has been going up year on year, and the previous government did think about if it kept going up, then they'd probably put a cap on that, but because they hadn't had anything else devolved down to the councils to take care of. So it's reassuring that we've got a balanced budget, we're not losing any services, and when you get your council tax bill through the post, that's going to be the lowest payment on there compared to Norfolk County Council, the police, and so on. So thanks for the hard work you're doing.
Thank you for your observation and comments, Peter. If there aren't any further questions at this point, I've got one is a sort of factual question to Councillor Cowan. If you confirm that after today's meeting, the only formal opportunity to discuss the budget will be at the full council on the 20th of February. I thought I'd just confirm that.
You are correct, Chairman.
I've got a couple
sorry,
of...
this has been to Cabinet as well, of course. This has been to Cabinet as well. So this is
Yes,
the second,
that's right. Yes,
second
it's through the
iteration.
Cabinet. I've got a couple of questions, very small ones, yes, no, and I apologise for not sending these to you in advance. One is in terms of capital receipts. The budget, I think, assumes that these will be realised in time and any potential gain. And the first question is, are they all on track? So that's one question. The second one is there's discussion around transfer to some town councils of car parks and how far that any transfers might impact on the capital and revenue positions going forward, and whether that affects our balance sheet, you know, positively or negatively. So I'm just sort of looking ahead. So again, my apologies for no advance notice, Phil. Thank you.
That's okay, Chairman. We're quite aware of those two questions anyway. They form part of our debate and discussion in setting the budget. As far as we're aware, given everything we know at any moment in time, the capital receipts are on track, otherwise they wouldn't be in the documents in the way they're presented. And the second point about the transfer to councils of car parks, you will note that in this budget for this coming year that we're looking at, we have not made any changes, have we, Alison, to our car park potential charges? They don't actually occur in next year.
So the car parks are included as per the existing decisions. Yeah.
And those conversations, let's put it that way, that are being held with various organisations in the district have not yet, I believe, reached any conclusion. So where we don't know what we don't know, we can't tell you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much. We appreciate there's a large corridor of uncertainty. I think we've got a question from Councillor Nunn and then Councillor Taylor again. Thank you. William.
Yeah, it's just around the national insurance contribution. I love this seat. The national insurance contribution. I think I read in the paperwork, albeit I can't find it, that our cost is about 350,000 this year. And whilst we think that's going to be funded from the government, we know it's not going to be funded next year or in a year going forwards. How are we building in that additional tax to the residents to offset that going forwards?
Yeah, thank you. So you're right about the value, and the grant for next year, we're not expecting to cover 100% based on the formula they've released. The budget doesn't assume any grant going forwards after that, and so it simply means our efficiencies have to increase to cover that, I'm afraid.
Thanks very much. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. I've just got a couple of questions which I've just lumped together, which I think really relate to the line. So page 94 on the capital programme. On the I know, yeah. So on the LABV loans, so it's talking about the, I just want a little bit of clarity if I could please. The figure is for the gross loans to be made. So with repayment of these loans from house sales. So are these, just to be like completely clear, those are properties being currently built and developed out by Breckland Bridge and then to be sold going forward, or are these a different sort of parcel of work?
Yeah, thanks. So these are Breckland Bridge loans only, and you're correct, the loans are provided, they build the houses, and once the sales take place, the loans are repaid with interest.
Again, just point of clarity. So where it talks about to deliver the business plan, could you just be like super clear, like which business plan that is and which parts of the business plan, you know, has it been sort of allocated to? Thanks.
We're kind of straying into areas, Chairman, where we may have difficulty in answering some questions about Breckland Bridge. What I can say is that there is a business plan which this council has approved. And I think I'll look to Rob here to clarify that point, if I may.
Councillor Cowan's the director on Breckland Bridge, and therefore he has an obligation to serve the interests of the company, and so it makes him difficult to answer specific questions around Breckland Bridge. I understand, Councillor Taylor, that you're meeting the Section 151 officer for a briefing on the budget. Maybe that issue can be clarified and picked up there, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rob. It is challenging at times in the public arena to answer questions as clearly as perhaps members might wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further observations? I wouldn't wish to curtail any further questions on this huge and very important subject. And without the budget, we can't deliver any services and help our communities. So I'll look round the room for any further inquiries, suggestions. No, thank you very much. Could I take this opportunity to thank Councillor Cowan, the 151 officer, Alison Chubbett, thanks for all your hard work. Keep up the good work, and obviously I'm sure members will look forward to further debate and discussion going forward, Cabinet, full council and beyond, and appreciate that there are degrees of uncertainty over which you've got no control, and you can only update members accordingly when you get additional funding settlements and guidance, and can advise us on potential impacts, opportunities and challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And if I could as well, I'd like to just table my thanks to the team that's led by Alison, because this year has been perhaps more challenging than we've seen in the past. And the timing, regrettably, of some of the announcements coming out of Westminster really do put a bit of pressure on the teams at local government level, because we are constrained in the calendar by when we have to get our budgets put together and then agreed by full council. Budget papers are complex. They are not simple documents for many people to read. We do try to, and I certainly try to, because I'm not a financial guru by any stretch of the imagination, we try to make them as easy for people to understand as possible. And if people do have questions, Chairman, and I'll use this opportunity as it is a public session, to say that when it does come to discussing and debating the budget at Council in February and the council tax setting, if any members do have detailed questions of which they are uncertain, it would be really helpful if we had those questions in advance, either in written form so we can give a written response, or at least have some heads up so that we can come fully prepared and answer those questions on the day, rather than, regrettably, which often happens, not just about budgets, but about having to say, yes, well, we'll come back to you and we'll get a response. This is a budget setting. It's such an important part of what any local authority undertakes on behalf of businesses, residents, communities in the district. I think it would help us if we were able to get any questions in advance. We can give a much more fulsome answer and response. And by the same token, if members of this commission feel that there are things that we ought to be tweaking or changing, please let us know. Because again, February is the opportunity for us to do so. And the team led by Alison will be, as a result of today's discussion, following on the Cabinet presentation, putting together the final papers for members to review. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan, for your comments, observations and encouragement to members. I'm sure people have noted your comments going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 8, which is the outside body feedback, which is a standing item. We may have had some information in advance to the meeting, unless there's any, if it isn't with the agenda, we haven't yet received anything, but can we have indication of any outside body feedback reports, please? First of all, Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. None of the 3 county joint committees that I serve on have met since the last meeting on the 19th of December. The Joint Museums Committee and the Record Office, the Records Committee meet on tomorrow week, and Health Scrutiny don't meet till the 20th of March. But I will continue to forward the minutes from HOSC to the members of the Commission. I've been doing that for a number of years. I've never had any comment back, so I'm still providing the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had meetings with the Youth Advisory Board and the QEH in Kings Lynn's board after your date for reports. But I've really just got to mention that, you probably know it's in the public domain, that the government has now delayed the start of the new build for the QEH hospital up to 3 years. And this announcement came after a week when it was guaranteed to West Norfolk's MP, James Wilde, that QEH as a RAC hospital would be prioritised. So it's very disappointing, not just for the residents of who use the hospital. There's quite a few Breckland residents go to the QEH. It's very disappointing for the staff too. So that's an ongoing baby, really, you know, so it might alter day by day.
Thank you very much, Peter. Any further outside body reports?
Well, I can just say I don't normally give an outside body report on the run.
Thank you very much, Peter. Gordon. Item 10, scrutiny call-ins. At the last meeting, one of the items mentioned, I think it was Councillor Nunn, asked us to look at the devolution sort of white paper. Though it's not necessarily calling about what Breckland's doing. Obviously, Breckland will be very busy. I'm going to, obviously that falls under the leader's portfolio, and I'm meeting the leader on this Monday afternoon to go forward, see how we can have a particular timetable for that in the Commission, which has a full programme. It's obviously of great interest to members and the public and businesses, and deserves appropriate time to it. So we also need to look at things like a date for it, and not just slotting this into a particular scrutiny committee, because it would take up more time than the agenda would actually allow. So I'll keep members informed of that. So action will be taking place on that, and we may know further details about that in the next few days, certainly by the end of the month. Anything else has developed? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, just to clarify, that technically won't be a call-in, it'll be added to the work programme. No decision's been taken by this authority on devolution or LGR at this stage, so technically a call-in is a call-in of an executive decision. So it's quite appropriate for you to have this topic on a work programme and for you to consider and discuss, as you've outlined, but technically it won't be a call-in because there's no executive decision to call in.
Yes, thank you to the Monitoring Officer for that technical and factually correct correction. So it's a sort of call-in, but not a call-in. It's a request really for discussion and debate on the work programme, and it will feature in the work programme, and it may be where we don't have a scheduled scrutiny committee. Obviously, we've got to book a room, so thank you for that, Rob. Turning to the work programme, which is attached, since the last meeting, we've discussed with various portfolio holders when they might fit round the particular programme. Some of the things we've actually followed the cycle of presentations in the whole year, so that every executive portfolio member is coming here. The programme we've got reflects all the portfolios. I'd just like to advise members that regarding the planning integration was mentioned and a follow-up for that. So that has now been organised with Councillor Suggett. With Councillor Hewitt, we'll be asking him to do a particular focus on Breckland Bridge, as we'd asked for before. And in September, I'm discussed already with Jill Duffy and Councillor Suggett in terms of the housing portfolio, not just homeless, but getting housing providers to come along. And I think, bearing in mind past experience at the Commission, I will be sending a note round to Commission members to ask them which areas they want to focus on with providers, because otherwise we will just have a wall-to-wall list of things, and they're things that we won't want to focus on, such as healthy homes, DFGs, a range of things that concern us as members, so we can actually discuss these in more detail and look at things like common key performance indicators for all providers. So that particular work is in progress. When we come, that's in September, when we come on later on in the year to returning to Councillor Ashby's executive brief, members will recall we had a rather long Commission meeting with 6 separate presentations. So I will be asking members any particular areas that they want to follow up, not so that we get all 6 back again, but so we can actually focus on some of those that we might want to hear more about and ask members to rank in order of priority, because I know that there wasn't a huge opportunity for questions in that rather long session that we had. You know, we did, for example, have a police inspector, I think, here from King's Lynn, who was sitting here for about 2 hours waiting to do their presentation. There was someone else from Mind, someone else from the CAB. So I hope we can have a much more structured discussion, focused discussion when we come to that particular area. With regard to the programme, are there any particular areas that people would like us, the Commission, to look at? I'm looking to Commission members initially to discuss that isn't on the programme going forward, where we can add it into the rolling programme or make requests for particular areas to be focused on. So please speak now, and if there isn't anything occurring today, please don't hesitate to write to myself and Ruth, you know, with your suggestions, and we'll try and accommodate those within the programme, which I'm sure you've all had a look at. The first thing is make sure we've got all the executive portfolios actually considered and scrutinised, but also there will be things coming up like we've had, potentially drilling down into areas like the budget, but also things like devolution and so forth, the things that we want external speakers to look at. So over to Commission members. So, Councillor Banbridge.
Just a small thought. It has already been mentioned in the budget, and that's about the increased cost of refuge collection with food waste. I know, speaking to people in my ward and in my area and parish councils, they're very surprised that there is a considerable amount of food waste, that it requires a completely separate system to do it. And I just wondered whether we could discuss whether or not we as a council could place food waste in just some areas of the district, as I think they used to in King's Lynn, or whether we actually need to do it at all.
Councillor Banbridge, unfortunately, the food waste rollout to households is going to be mandated to all properties by government, so that choice isn't a choice for us as local authorities. So we're currently in the process of rolling out collections to businesses where there is some degree of option of whether you provide that service or signpost elsewhere. With regard to residential properties, I think you're quite right to question the value of it in a rural area such as ours, but it will be mandated and we will have to provide that service.
Thank you very much for that helpful clarification, and we'll just do what we're told. Thank you. Councillor Kyburd.
I believe that there is a glass bottle deposit scheme being introduced next year. What is that going to affect the amount we get for recycling, and how will the sales outlets deal with the return product? I mean, I think we get an income from recycling glass. I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of 12p's refunded to customers, but I'd like to put it as an item forward for further thought in the first instance.
Well, I think taking also into account what Councillor Banbridge has said, I think we can bring some of those issues back here. The other thing which we haven't done for a long while, and it depends on how extensive the topic is. As you know, if members of the Commission decide they want a particular task and finish group to look at things, like we have one, for example, around you know, litter waste, not waste disposal, but you know, littering, etc. And we had a very useful thing also chaired by Linda Turner. So there are always opportunities going forward if there's enough momentum to do that, to have a group looking and then reporting back here, or there may be an opportunity where the other parts of the council need to have a sort of education and briefing for members on, you know, those particular subjects. So thank you, Robert. Councillor Blackburn.
Am I allowed to ask for something to be looked at by the overviewing scrutiny?
Yeah. You can make a request
Great. Okay.
as a non-commissioned member. It's then if it's then up to the commission members who are here today to decide whether they wish to take that that on board.
In that case, temporary accommodation for people found. I am on microphone. Okay. Temporary accommodation, the cost of for people who have been found homeless and at full duty is a massive cost. Prevention of homelessness is a massive cost. Is that something that a small group of people could look at rather than sort of squeezing it in with everything else? It's a huge, huge area and an escalating cost for this authority. A small group looking at ways of alleviating that might be useful.
Well, I'll put that to commission members. Obviously, there are opportunities in the programme where we have both looking at homelessness, but also looking again at the housing portfolio with the Council of Suggett. If members feel that there would be use in having a group formed, cross-party group to look at the area you suggested, then that's up to the commission members. But it obviously doesn't preclude you from making, you know, direct inquiries both to, you know, to the officers and the portfolio holder, you know, to get some clarity, you know, either at a council meeting or beforehand, you know, because all these things are important and interlinked. And we know temporary accommodation is key around homelessness, but also to the impact on the council's, you know, finance as well as the individuals. So if commission members feel that they wish to form a little group to that will be up to the commission. So perhaps I could ask commission members for any responses to Councillor Blackburn. Peter.
Yeah, I can understand what Councillor Blackburn's been saying, and the costs have been going up on and on. But I don't think we'd benefit anything from us in there because it is being looked at a higher level. The housing officers, Jill Duffy and her teams are always looking at reducing B&Bs, hotels, and then, for instance, this last year or so, we've just opened Elm House to help with a semi-permanent residence there. And I think that's as and when time and money is available, then I think then we are already looking at that on a bigger scale and what we could offer.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your comments and also the interest of Councillor Blackburn. I'll ask for sort of indication of whether we want to go down that route, but again, that doesn't mean that I'm sure that the Commission don't regard that as an important issue. It's a question of how it's addressed and where it's addressed. So perhaps I could ask Commission members for a show of hands of those who are Commission members, whether they want to take up Councillor Blackburn's suggestion in that particular format.
Can I say, Chairman, I think the Council already do this in a number of forms. I mean, it's such a complex issue that a small group of councillors looking at it would, in fact, probably produce some good results, but we're already doing it. I think we're already dealing with it in several ways, and I mean, Breckland as a council have a good record in recent years of providing additional accommodation for people who are homeless or coming off the homeless spectrum into slightly more permanent accommodation. I mean, it's a huge cost, and it's a cost that in a way we probably ought not to have as a district council, but it is one that's there. And I'm sure there are answers, but the answers are very wide-ranging, and it is, I thought, being looked at by Cabinet and by other people talking to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Yes, I mean, I've sensed there isn't the particular support for that. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm fully in support of David's suggestion. The reasons for homelessness have changed drastically over the last five years. We're now having no-fault evictions, etc., etc. I mean, the playing field has changed, and I think possibly to have a small group to get in to see what's actually really happening might be beneficial to us all.
Councillor Samantha Taylor.
Hi, yeah, could I maybe just suggest that we invite members of our housing team to come and give us a report on this subject, and then we process what they give us and what information is fed to us, and then if we still feel that it's a need, look at forming a group, because then at least we'll have the information at hand to make an informed decision on whether or not we need a group to dig into this deeper.
That's very helpful, Councillor Taylor. Can I take Councillor Khyber, then I want to go back to Councillor Blackburn, please.
Fully in agreement with Councillor Sam Taylor's suggestion. I think we need a high-level presentation, and then we can ask officers where they consider the future difficulties are, and then we decide whether we have a working party. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Would that be helpful, Councillor Blackburn? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Khyber. Thanks very much for your suggestion. Obviously, one of the things also perhaps it'd be helpful for you if I, as the chair, sort of iterate where these things are currently being discussed and timetables, funding, etc., so that you, like many of us, we've all got particular interests and expertise in particular areas, and we're all keen to, tackle this huge issue. So, thank you for raising it. Thank you. There aren't any other items for the Commission in terms of the work programme. The next meeting we have is the 6th of March at 10 o'clock. Nothing in between. Obviously, I'll advise members, particularly if there are any particular scheduled meetings, unscheduled meetings rather, special meetings or things such as devolution, and keep members informed of any progress such as the item which Councillor Blackburn referred to. So I think with that I would like to close the formal part of the meeting and thank members for their contributions and our officers for attending today. Thank you very much.